Could I go back to your Jordan Peterson thing about offensiveness? When I heard you talk about, sometimes it's necessary to risk offending. I guess I have a slightly different take, and I wonder what you think of this. And I think it's desirable and useful to have disagreements with people. But what I see in the word offensive is to express your alternative view or your differing or express your difference of opinion in a way that may feel offensive. I think it's possible to express difference of opinion with respect.
Yeah.
So another way of saying that is, and we tell our therapists who we train, can you can you say something perhaps uh, confrontational or contrary to what the person is saying, but in a listenable way? Is it possible that I could disagree with you in a way where you would feel okay that I had a differing opinion? But sometimes we feel like a difference of opinion has to be expressed in a way, and it will inevitably lead to someone being offended. Is it possible? Do you think it's possible to express difference of opinion to a person where they won't feel offended? Or do you think that's inevitable?
Well, I mean, I think that's what's important, I think, and I'm glad that you brought it up that way because when I heard the quote, for me, the way he worded it was in order to think, you have to risk being offensive. And
Okay.
I think that the fact that you're saying you're risking being offensive to me means
Yeah.
you're sharing something that could be, but you don't know it to be. Like you're genuinely putting yourself out there rather than being offensive on purpose or
Mhm.
being challenging on purpose. This is to think. You have to you got to put yourself out there, and it might and you're putting yourself
Sure.
out there in a way that's possible that you could offend someone. But
Yes.
to me, it's not you have the right to offend or that you should be offensive. It's
Right.
more it's possible, but
Yeah.
don't hold your thoughts back
Sure.
because you might offend. Like
Yeah.
that's but you have to be like I said with safe spaces. You have to be we have to have safe spaces from
Hmm.
offense. That's what I think. That's why I really enjoy some of the lunchtime conversations I have with some of my buddies because we're in an environment of disagreement. They're
Right.
very much more right than I am left, and
Yeah.
so a lot of the conversations we have are we don't see eye to eye, but
Right.
the conversation space is one where they have the it's a safe space for them to speak freely
Right.
like they would among a bunch of other conservative feeling people. And I
Mhm.
can speak freely from
Yeah.
my own perspective. And we
Yeah.
all respect that we might something might feel offensive or that we might be offended by it. But
Right.
I think the glue that keeps it together is that you have something in common with or a mutual respect for the other person. It's
Mhm.
inherent. It is not um, they're not just an anonymous person online that you can just attack because they think differently than you because you want to
Right.
win. This is someone that you appreciate and respect and that you could consider a
Yeah.
friend, and then
Yeah.
you go there. And then you can go there with a voice and with ears that are willing to listen
Hmm.
and know that you'll be heard. Like
Sure.
I almost feel like it's that silly. It's not silly, but the from Remember the Titans when the coach is like, "You're gonna go in a room with somebody. You're gonna room with somebody you don't know." And in that case, it's with someone of the opposite race, but it could be someone you don't align with politically. Intentionally befriend them. Find out that you're both the same sports fans, or that you're the same. You go to the same workout facility. It doesn't matter what it is,
Mhm.
but affiliate yourself with someone that you don't agree with politically. Become their friend.
Mhm.
Like enjoy their company for reasons other than that, and then come to a place where you can talk and listen because you respect them enough to
Mhm.
maybe grow a little. That's I don't feel like necessarily my views have changed, but I certainly view the world differently because I've allowed myself to listen to the way
Mhm.
other people.
Mhm.
It's made me far less polarizing than I've ever been.
Right.
It doesn't mean that I'm more center than I used to be. I really don't think I've. I mean, maybe you become a little more center as you get older. I'm not certain about that, but I, not from these conversations. I don't think. But what's interesting is that the more you talk, the more you get into conversations, the more you realize that you do align with them in ways that you didn't know that you did.
Mhm.
That things pop up, and you're like, oh, yeah, we absolutely agree on this. And that's where you said it's not two teams and you're on one team or the other. It's way
Oh,
more complicated.
right. And I think that if I meet somebody and I want to say something that could be controversial or offensive, I probably would preface it by asking them, saying, I have a thought that I'd like to express with you, and it could be a little bit toasty. Would it be okay if I talked about it, or should I keep it to myself? And then they can tell me whether they're ready for that or not. And if they say, I really don't want to hear it, and then I said, fine, and I don't bring it up. So in a sense, I'm kind of letting them be involved in it rather than just kind of springing it on them, and then it may be too much, or maybe it's the wrong time, or
Yeah,
maybe they just don't want to hear it, and maybe our relationship should not have. They say, well, what's it about? And I say, well, it's about politics and the presidential election, and they say, I don't want to hear it. And they say, well, let's maybe we should just not have that be part of our relationship. So we
yeah,
remove it, we take it
yeah,
out, and we still kind of have our fun together, or we share interests, and we leave out politics or religion or money or whatever the hot button topic is.
yeah, yeah. Well,
So
it's interesting that you say it that way because I'm even less forward than that. I would say that one of the most important values that I hold, if any, is I wish that we could all be more tactful. And I feel like for
yeah,
me, when you say you're forward enough to say that I've thought of something that I would like to share, what would you think about that? I just don't. I don't say it. I
yeah,
don't ask. I just keep it to myself because
yeah,
unless I'm comfortable enough with that person
yeah.
to just know that it's okay to say, I just don't. But
That's it.
it's interesting to be forward enough. It's still respectful and tactful
Yeah,
to ask because then you're giving them the power of the
yeah.
conversation.
And
Not that you're not, it's not a power struggle, but you're allowing them to decide if they want to go down that road,
it's
and you're
also
doing it in a way.
respectful to yourself. So if you're harboring some thoughts and you're deliberately withholding them, it's almost like you wonder if that's kind of keeping a toxicity inside. And so I think it is fair to say, to someone, would it be okay if we talked about this, even though I know we're maybe going to have difference of opinion? And at least you're honoring the possibility of talking about it, but you're not, forcing it. But to
Not,
just swallow it, to just say, I'm not going to talk about that because I'm afraid of what might happen, in a sense, maybe you are uh, shortchanging your views, and maybe you should have a right to talk about them with some people who you want to talk about with. Um, so uh, maybe that self-censoring uh, may be a bit unfair to you. What do you think?
and maybe, and that's very true, and maybe also robbing those individuals that I choose not to share that thought
Right,
with, whatever that might be,
right,
robbing them the possible conversation, and not okay that they would be enlightened and
yeah,
they would be made right by it, but they would be enriched by hearing more
right,
conversation that I bring to the table. Not that it's going to change their
right,
mind, but that it's
right, right,
valuable for them to hear. Even though I feel like in the context of the relationship that I
right.
just rather just hold that out. Don't say it.
Well, say you had some disagreement with me. something you really felt I was very wrong-headed about, and or something was sharp division, and you say, "Oh, I can't bring that up with my dad because, that I just don't want to risk some kind of rift or something." In a sense, that's a statement of the quality of our relationship. You're saying, "I don't think that my relationship with that person, in this case, my father, could handle it. I
Mhm.
don't, I think it would be too risky for our
Right.
relationship." So in a sense, you're saying the relationship is has a ceiling, and we can't go past it. Now that could actually be true. I mean, it could be possible that it can't handle that, and so you
Yeah.
do keep it quiet. But on the other hand, it's worth thinking about saying maybe our relationship could handle that, and maybe that's worth exploring, at
Right.
least to begin with.
Right. Right. Well, and it adds some layers to it when you're talking about your parent as opposed to just someone that you don't
Yeah,
know very well. Maybe it's a work colleague that you're not really, totally sure of. It makes it way more complicated there because tactfully you don't want to create any sort of unnecessary tension in the workplace by
sure.
bringing up something that maybe, even though you might feel strongly about
Yeah,
sharing, you just don't want to go there. But it's interesting to think about at least putting out there that you like sort of a feeler. Like I
that
have
is.
this. I wanted to say this, but I'm not really sure. How do you feel
Yeah.
about me
Mhm.
trying this out? Because I think on the surface, by saying that, you're laying yourself out. You're opening yourself up for them to allow you in, and then but you're already doing it gently and
Yeah,
respectfully by
right.
asking if it's okay to talk about it. And even if you said, maybe, can I try this? And, are you okay with me talking about this? And if not, if I
Yeah,
say it and you don't like it, then we can just leave it alone. Like
right,
it's
right.
super,
Yeah.
super careful and it is tactful, but it's a
Mm,
little bit, it's like one step further
yeah,
forward than
yeah.
most of the time I would behave.
Well, we also know this within couple relationships. Say there's tensions between a couple. There's some difference of opinion that, maybe erupts in arguments, or you're worried that it would be an argument if you brought it up. And so you keep a lid on it. Well, we all know from couple relationships that we have and have had that by holding back on some things that are kind of important differences, it can actually make the relationship suffer. There could be some coldness or some building tension that kind of will maybe come out later in some
Yeah.
explosive way because you've been harboring something that you wanted to say but you couldn't say or didn't think you could say. So we
Yeah.
know we know these things work this way. So the question is, how can I bring up controversial, uh, potentially disagreeing topics in a way that my partner, my conversational partner, can feel respected and be in there with me? How can I do that to prepare the soil to talk about something that's going to be tough?
And it's interesting because the examples you brought up with a parent or a spouse are ones that I think what you have is a history. So
Yeah,
when you brought up you as an example and me, all I can think of with us is I believe that you've over the years developed an environment that would allow me to bring up whatever it was. Like it's like this is a bad example, but it's like your dog. You can either treat your dog in a way that your dog cowers when you come close because it thinks you're going to hit it, and sometimes the dog's going to see you and just be excited because
yeah,
it's had a wonderful life experience with you. And so I think that with those two types of relationships that are very involved,
yeah.
you, there's so much history that would cause someone to either hold back or feel absolutely comfortable sharing.
Hmm.
So that's that one would really be a hard one to broach with a couple if they have any kind of history of not
Yeah,
being able to share because
sure.
it's gone poorly in the past, or um, one of the two just knows if I try,
Mhm.
um, it's just going to get worse if I bring it up, so I just don't.
Right.
Like that's because there's all that history behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lesson that I could learn from this is that being willing, if you're not sure, because you don't have that. I wish I could remember this friend of mine, John, my friend. He always talks about in the absence of more specific details, that's where you go to that sort of a macro, like you have to fall back on your previous experience. He says it way more eloquently than I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
but you take in the information in front of you and you have to decide from the macro level viewpoint of that person
Mm-hmm.
because you don't know that. You
Right.
have to work off of well, people about your age,
Yeah.
of your nationality and your,
Yeah.
I have to make a quick judgment about how I'm going to interact with you because I don't know you.
Yeah.
Um, but in the absence of that specific information, that might be a way. And I'm not talking about just with a perfect stranger necessarily, but man, even on social media, can you imagine if someone posted something, what you posted back saying, I'd like to, I kind of have something that I want to share, but I want to make sure that you're okay with me sharing it. Can you imagine just if someone said that? First of all, if you're skeptical, then your first thought is, boy, this person's going to throw a haymaker at me, and I got to better get ready. You
Yeah.
but it also reminds me of an anecdote when I at one of my previous businesses. I can remember it was kind of a toxic work environment where everybody was kind of bitter all the time, down. So I just started like at the end of the workday, as people left, I'd be like, "Good job today," you know, you know, thanks for doing, thanks for working, um, really appreciate what you've done, great job. And at first, people are like, "You messing with me?" like I'm just being so totally sarcastic. And I said, you know what? No, like you come here and you work your tail off for 8 hours and you don't really feel it. You don't feel the love. Nobody is appreciating you. And so
Right.
there isn't any reason. I've witnessed you working all day. So I'm telling you, I'm not your boss, but I'm telling you, good job. And it took a little while, but after a little while, people started saying it back. They would smile. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And that's little, and it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
But interesting how, yeah, I was even thinking about that. If you on social media, if you tried to be as nice as you just were saying, something I would like to share. Are you comfortable with me doing that?
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
first, I can just imagine people would be like, "You're messing with me," you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's really interesting to interact with people, you know.
Yeah. Well, the media, the social media stuff is that on your end or is
No,
that on?
that had to be you. It wasn't.
Okay. Some horn went off. Um, the social media stuff, becomes really too important, I think, to a lot of people. I remember I had a family one time. The father and son came in. Son was a young teenager, and they got into an argument. They've been in an argument, and so out of frustration, the father said to the boy, "I'm going to defriend you," and he just exploded in anger. And I'm thinking, who gives a rat's about that? Why is that important? But to him it was life and death. This was the ultimate insult, was to
Yeah,
be defriended. And I'm thinking, where have we how have we gotten to this place where a comment on media or availability to a group or something carries such weight in people's self-esteem? So I think, I mean, I've a couple times recently just thought about, getting off of social media altogether because of some of the stuff that just seems to be contributing to hostility and or triviality. I've
yeah.
not gotten off of it, but because I like pictures and stuff, uh, but but it's like I think it causes as much harm as it does good.
I think you're right. I mean, I remember a specific instance. This was a long time ago, before you could not follow someone. You can do that where you don't unfriend them, but you just want to make it so you don't see their posts unless you go look. And the person, this was a long time ago, they just posted a lot of negative political things. And this is interesting what you were talking about. This goes to I decided, I got so tired of seeing it because that's all that was posted, just negative political things. I just decided to unfriend because I didn't feel comfortable telling them that they can't or ask them to not post.
Right.
I just decided that was their right, but that's not what I used social media for. So I unfriended that person. And it wasn't too long after that the person noticed that I had unfriended and sent me a long message about how thought we were friends and that and I responded back and I literally just laid it out. I said, there are a lot of these things that you post that I know it's not what I used social media for, and I didn't feel I was comfortable telling you can't. So I made that decision because I just felt like you should be able to do it if you want to, but I didn't want to see it. But if you ever come into town, I would love to see you.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
but never heard from the person. So,
Yeah.
but people can take it way more seriously than they need to. That doesn't your friendship on a social media site should not dictate real life. I mean,
Yeah.
that's that
Right.
to have a father and son be like that. First off, for the father to threaten it, to me means that the kid he knew how much it meant to the kid.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like it wasn't like the kid overreacted necessarily. It was more that the dad knew that the kid had
Yeah.
overreacted.
They were both locked in this battle, and it was just a new way to fight with each other.
Oh man.